Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much to FSI for inviting me to this activity. So let me share to you my presentation. So my topic is on the anthropological evidence of precolonial Southeast Asian encounters. So first of all, let me share to you what anthropologists use as data when studying about cultures or peoples in general. So anthropology has four fields, and these are biological anthropology, archaeology, cultural anthropology, linguistic anthropology. And based on these four fields, these are the sources of information that we utilize. In biological anthropology, we study about human genetics, and therefore DNA will be a source of information. In archaeology, we study artifacts and archaeological sites and features. In cultural anthropology, we do ethnographic research and therefore ethnographies, and comparing these ethnographic researches with one another will be a source, as well as folkloric research, such as songs, music, dances. And finally, in linguistic anthropology, we study language structure in structural linguistics, as well as the study of loan words in historical linguistics. So I will be referring to these four fields in my presentation. First of all, on the genetic evidence. There was a very recent study about the peopling of Southeast Asia and the Pacific, and this was only in 2020, released in 2020. And the study was based on DNA of various populations in the region. Unfortunately, these migrations occurred during the prehistoric period. We're talking about thousands of years. And therefore, this is not part of our discussion today because I will be focusing on the proto-historic period or the pre-colonial era, the period prior to the coming of colonizers in Southeast Asia. So let's put this aside. Basically, I will be focusing on archaeological evidences, cultural anthropological evidences, and linguistic evidences. In terms of archaeological evidences, there are several artifacts that have been discovered in the Philippines that were identified as coming from other parts of the region, particularly from China, Taiwan, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Brunei, and others. These artifacts prove that there was an ongoing trade between the Philippines and these countries during the pre-colonial era. I could not discuss all of them, but let me show to you some examples. So probably many of you know about the golden image of Agusan, which is dated about 900 to 950 AD. It was found in the Wawa River in Esperanza, Agusan, way back in 1917. It is currently housed at the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. Some sources call this as the Golden Tara of Agusan, but there are others that dispute this. So the debate is whether it is of Hindu or Buddhist origin. And the archaeologist H. Oatley Bayer, quoting from other archaeological sources, even said that it may have been manufactured in the Philippines based on the absence of the tools that this image is holding, but copying a style that was prevalent in insular Southeast Asia, basically a Hindu-Buddhist tradition in Southeast Asia during that time. Several gold ornaments were found in the Philippines, and of course, the Ayala Museum has on its display a gold collection of the Philippines. Here are some examples: the golden kinari found in Surigao, the Garuda ornament found in Eastern Visayas, and of course, there are several Garuda ornaments found in the Philippines. The Garuda is the mythical vessel of Shiva. So it was also found in Brooks Point, Palawan, as well as in Cebu. Here is the Padmapani medallion from Batangas, discovered in 1961. And the dating of the medallion is in the 12th to 13th century AD. It is believed to be the image of Avalokitesvara Padmapani, based on a Buddhist Siamese tradition, because there would be different styles of depicting the Padmapani in different parts of Southeast Asia. So this is a Thai style. However, the medallion is believed to have reached the Philippines only during the 14th century. So the medallion was older, but the archaeological site was a century later, based on associated artifacts found in the archaeological site. Another example is the copper Ganesha figurine from Mactan. It was found in 1921 by H.O.T. Bayer himself. And it was fashioned based on a Hindu-Indonesian style, although it may have been locally made based on the crudeness of the design. Unfortunately, this artifact has been destroyed during World War II, and what remains will be the picture of this artifact. Now, there would also be, so those examples a while ago were coming from Southeast Asia, such as Thailand, Indonesia, etc. But there are several artifacts also coming from the neighboring region of China. This picture depicts the balimbing jarlet. So it is named after a Philippine fruit, which is the balimbing. And balimbing jarlets were produced in southern China during the Yuan dynasty, that is 1280 up to 1368 AD. However, it was only produced for the Philippine market, not for the Malaysian market, not for the Thai market, not for the Indonesian market. It was exported only for the Philippines. And this is what makes it unique. So this artifact is commonly found in many burial sites in the Philippines because it served as graveware or pabaon sa patay. Now, a perfect example of Southeast Asian trade will be the Pandanan wreck, which was discovered in 1995 off the southern island of Palawan, near Pandanan Island. So it contained 4,722 artifacts coming from Vietnam, coming from northern and central Vietnam, from Thailand, and from China. So it did not only contain Chinese ware. In the past, once we see porcelain in an archaeological setting, we always say, these are Chinese porcelain. But the Pandanan wreck contained specimens coming from different countries, including earthenware, which are more difficult to place from where they came from, because earthenware, pottery in different parts of the region look similar with one another. So most probably this was a trading vessel that went from port to port in Southeast Asia, but unfortunately got wrecked near Palawan. The dating of 1414 is actually, it could be earlier, and it could be a little later than 1414, but the date was based on a Chinese coin found together with these artifacts dating 1414. Now, in terms of ethnographic sources, there are several ethnographic and ethnological studies that would show several shared culture traits among and between the different peoples of Southeast Asia. These shared traits may be proofs of common cultural origins or cultural borrowing. So it's not necessarily that one borrowed from the other, but because we had common roots as Southeast Asian citizens. There was no Philippines yet, there was no Thailand yet, there was no Vietnam yet. We are all citizens of this region of Southeast Asia. But there are some culture traits that we know have been borrowed from one region to another. Now, an analysis of existing material culture, no longer in an archaeological context, would also show evidences of early Southeast Asian trade. And these are some examples. I did my PhD studies in Kalinga province in northern Luzon. And in Kalinga, you will see the women wearing heirloom beads. And these beads, many of them are glass beads made of carnelian stones coming all the way from India. But we know there was no direct relations between Philippines and India during that time. So most probably the Kalingas traded with Ilocanos and Pangasinenses, and Ilocanos and Pangasinenses traded with Indianized states in Southeast Asia, such as in Champa, in Mataram, etc. Here is another example comparing the bulul or guardian ancestors from Ifugao and those from central Vietnam. And we will see similarities, not just in form, so there would be a standing and sitting bulul, but also in terms of what they are used for. So they are a representation of the group's ancestors, and they are supposed to guard either the rice in the case of Ifugao or houses in the case of Champa. Of course, many of you are familiar with the Vigan jars, which in Ilocos is called Burnay. But many of you probably don't know that the name Burnay is the Filipino name for Brunei or Borneo. In Borneo, they're not called Burnay, they're called Tempayan, which is similar to the Tagalog Tapayan. And we know tapay is anything that was where you make yeast to make rice wine or other types of food. So again, a tradition that was shared across Southeast Asia. We thought tinikling is a very Filipino dance. Yes, it is a Filipino dance, but it is something that is shared in other parts of the region. So there will be versions of the tinikling in Sabah, in Northeast Thailand, in Taiwan, and other parts of the region. Of course, I'm mentioning Taiwan because Taiwan is culturally part of Southeast Asia than it is part of East Asia. In terms of folklore, we think that the Tiyanak and the Manananggal are unique to the Philippines. However, in Indonesia and Malaysia, they call it Pontianak. And while the Manananggal is called Tanggal in Malaysia. Of course, there would be some differences. The Indonesian version of the Pontianak is the pregnant woman who died giving childbirth. While the Philippine version of the Tiyanak, it is the baby that died because of the childbirth of the mother. Now, The tanggal in Malaysia is where the head floats in the air and not coming from the waist and lifting up the upper body. Despite these differences, based on linguistic similarities, we know that this folklore is shared throughout the region. Now, of course, this will already be written sources, but we could relate this with place names, which is a part of the study of folklore. Based on records coming from the southern Liang of China, it mentions about the kingdom of Langkasuka, which is now found in southern part of Thailand and northern part of the Malay Peninsula. And here you see a picture of a Langkasuka man wearing cotton clothing. And according to southern Liang sources, the cotton cloth comes from Luzon, and more particularly from Bulacan, where cotton fields were during that time. Of course, in early Spanish dictionaries and vocabularies, Bulacan was mentioned as a place of cotton fields. Now, this is interesting because it just not shows trade relations, but also political relations. Based on Javanese sources, King Wikramawardhana of the Majapahit kingdom of Java sent 2 elephants to Raja Baginda of Sulu in 1395 AD. This is a male and a female elephant, and they were let loose in the island of Sulu. And they reproduced in that place. Now, there are several places in Sulu that are named after these elephants, such as in Patikul, the Lubluban Gajah. Of course, Gajah is the elephant. Lubluban is where the elephants swim, okay? And the Halaman Gajah, where the elephants eat in Maimbong, Sulu. So we have folkloric sources now compared with place names in Bahasa Sug, or the Tausug language. Okay. Now, the Ramayana epic is something that is found all over Southeast Asia. So this is an important text of Hinduism and one of the longest epics in the world. The text, the oldest parts of the text date from the 7th century BC, while the newer ones date during the 3rd century AD. And the Ramayana is called by many names in Southeast Asia. So it's found in Thailand, Cambodia, Java, Bali, Sumatra, Malaysia, Laos, Myanmar, Annam, Champa, and the Philippines, more particularly among the Maranaos, where it is called Maharaja Lawana. So an Indian epic that has spread in Indianized states in Southeast Asia and eventually into outlying regions. So they may not be kingdoms or chiefdoms, but the epic has been passed on to many peoples of Southeast Asia. Now, the last evidences will come from linguistic evidences. In Southeast Asia, we have 4 language families. These are the Austroasiatic languages found in Cambodia and Vietnam, Austronesian languages spread throughout Southeast Asia. And here you see a map of Austronesian languages, including almost all Philippine languages, Sino-Tibetan languages, particularly in Myanmar, and Thai-Kadai languages found in Thailand. Now, you will see, for example, the Philippines, and opposite to it is Champa in Vietnam, that one colored by red. So around it, people are speaking Austroasiatic languages, but Champa speaks languages that are related to the languages of Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. So it is not really unusual that there is a lot of sharing of material as well as non-material culture traits between these areas of Southeast Asia. Now, historical linguists use evidences of loan words, words that are borrowed from external sources, as evidences of relations, as evidences of borrowing of concepts or of terms. There may have been a local term for it, but later on, the people borrowed a foreign language to replace a more indigenous term. Dr. Juan Francisco in 1963 identified 150 Sanskrit words in Philippine languages. And among these 150 words, 64% of them are found in Tagalog, 36% found in Cebuano, 28% found in Ilocano and in Tausug, Maguindanao, Maranao, and Hanunoo, Mangyan. Interestingly, in Igorot languages, only 10%. That means probably not as much relationship between the Cordillera region directly with Indianized states of Southeast Asia. So here are some examples of Sanskrit-derived words in Tagalog. Bathala, Diwata, Sampagita, Suka, Kalapati, Patola, Basa or Bihasa, Salita, Lisa, Dalita, Dukha. Of course, sometimes meanings have changed, but like Basa is a story, but became to read in Filipino. And here is a map showing Indianized chiefdoms in Southeast Asia during that time. Dvaravati, Chenla, Champa, Langkasuka, which I mentioned a while ago, Srivijaya, Mataram. So there is no evidence that the Philippines was directly under these Indianized states, but definitely the Philippines or our ancestors traded and had foreign relations with these Indianized states. So it was not directly from India, but through Indianized states of Southeast Asia. Now, Malay loan words. Malay was the lingua franca of Southeast Asian trade during the pre-colonial era. According to John Wolfe, he said that Manila was a bilingual community upon the coming of the Spanish, especially the local elite. They spoke Malay, while the masses spoke Tagalog. So if now we have Taglish, in pre-colonial Manila, there was Taglay, a combination of Tagalog and Malay. And this we will see later in the Laguna copper inscription. So Wolfe lists 300 Tagalog terms coming from Malay. Now, this is a picture of the Laguna copper inscription. It's now at the National Museum. And the text is written in Kawi, which is an old Javanese script. And the dating is 900 AD. So this is much older than our Baybayin. But the language of the Laguna copper inscription was mainly Old Malay with some Tagalog words. And it talks about debt or utang, that a certain person has already paid his debt. In Indonesia, we have a lot of copper inscriptions also recording certain events. Here are examples of Malay loanwords: atsara, kaban, kalabaw, hukom, agimat, binibini, asal, diwa, payong, datu, kawani, halimaw. Again, some terms have changed through time, such as harimau in Malay referred to a tiger, but in the Philippines, it became a beast, a mythical creature such as a monster. Was there no kalabaw in the Philippines prior to our relationship with the Malays? Yes, there was, but the old Tagalog term for kalabaw, based on Spanish dictionaries, was anwang, similar to Ilocano nuwang. But later, we borrowed karbao from Malay. Hokkien loan words. So I changed this while Manuel said Chinese loan words, but looking at them, they mainly came from Fujian province, where Hokkien is spoken. So Manuel identified 150 words in Tagalog borrowed from Hokkien, and many of these are found in foodstuff as well as in kinship relationships, such as bihon, miki, mami, miswa, pansit, bakya, bilao, suki, husi, pakyao, of course, our champion Pacquiao, susi, ate, diche, sanse, kuya, diko, sangko, shaho, inso, etc. Okay. Unfortunately, it is quite difficult right now when these Chinese terms entered the Philippines. Was it during the pre-colonial period or already during Spanish contact? Because Chinese migration in the Philippines was quite continuous all the way to the Spanish colonial period. But definitely there would be some of these terms that were already present even during the pre-colonial period. I must also mention that did it come from Sanskrit? Did it come from Malay? Did it come from Chinese? Of course, there would be a debate such as sushi, but you know, in Malay, it is chuchi and probably borrowed from Sanskrit as well. So there would be shared terms also that need to be further investigated. Now, here are my concluding remarks. Anthropological evidences show that there is an exchange of artifacts and culture traits between Southeast Asian peoples during the pre-colonial times. These exchanges prove that there were already trade and also possibly political relations between early states and the chiefdoms in the region. The case of Raja Baginda, of course, in Sulu, was not just a trade relationship because it is a recognition by the Majapahit that Raja Baginda is the ruler of Sulu. That's why he was given gifts of elephants. These relations should be viewed in both directions. Thus, it is also important to look at Philippine artifacts and culture traits that are also found in other Southeast Asian nations. Unfortunately, I was not able to do that in this presentation because I am still pursuing that part of my research. For example, when I visited Patani in southern Thailand, I saw a monument written in Thai, and I asked my Thai friends, what does that marker say? And when they read it, it pertains to a Patani. Patani is a Malay-speaking region in Thailand. It refers to a Patani queen who visited Luzon but got sick and died when she came back to Patani. Now, why would a Patani queen go to Luzon? This is something to investigate. I have friends also from Sangir in Indonesia who mentioned to me about their folklore that Lakandula previously ruled Sangir Island in Sulawesi. Now, whether this is the same Lakandula of Tondo or another Lakandula, we don't know right now, but this is something to investigate. Anthropological evidences should complement written archival sources. Though through this, there will be a triangulation of historical sources. So I will leave it to historians to discuss about historical sources because they are in a better position in doing that. Finally, aside from celebrating our pre-colonial linkages with one another, the ASEAN should revive and further strengthen these cultural links between our peoples, such as in the talk of Ambassador Sir Vigan about having common identity, common symbols, and common theme, common hymn. I don't know if ASEAN would go as far as having a common lingua franca, not based on English. This is something that ASEAN should be talking about in the future. Thank you very much. I know there will be a discussion later on, but you could also email me at ntcastro1@up.edu.ph and also follow me on YouTube. Thank you very much.